Now, your private data has been exposed to cyber criminals. And if you think this is a scary thought, it is really a reality if you consider that hundreds of millions of data sets have been compromised. And many companies have moved to hybrid working models, and collaboration tools like Teams are key to this. And most believe they are safe, but a Mimecast study found about 90% of employees have been breached. Duane Nicol, a cybersecurity expert at Mimecast, joins us now for more on these revelations. Duane, thanks so much for your time. You know, when we go on these platforms, the assumption is that there is your firewalls and all sorts of other protective measures that you're not necessarily at risk. What is the flip side of that?
Well, morning, Cindy, and thanks so much for having me. I think one of the biggest things that you mentioned there is the word assumption, right? An assumption in today's world is a very dangerous predictor of what's actually going on in the real world. You know, we're living in these times where, you know, the normal that's been thrust upon us is everyone's working remotely. And the one word that links people to the tools back at the office is this item of collaboration. And collaboration is meant to, you know, help people remain connected and help people remain, you know, kind of safe. But it's brought on such an immense amount of risk to an organization because as people work more and more from home, you know, security protocols and tools are less and less effective and have to be thought about at a corporate strategy perspective to keep their users and their data safe.
Yes, and how do you mitigate against that, especially if you're going to log in on a unsecure Wi-Fi, for example? You know, if you don't have the protective measures and somebody working remotely and due to load shedding, you can't work from home. So you find a convenient coffee shop and you log on probably even different Wi-Fi settings. Does that pose a risk as well?
That poses a massive risk. And, you know, what you've just mentioned is the perfect storm companies and, you know, employees are finding themselves in: load shedding, working from home environments, coffee shops becoming your office. You know, again, that talks to the threat surface that companies are facing and how they need to extend that into their end user base. Now, one of the biggest things that customers typically do is look at an awareness training strategy. And one of the biggest stats that came out in our study was the fact that a lot of companies felt confident that they are providing a level of satisfactory training to their employees. But when interviewing the employees, it was roughly 8% that said they've received some form of training around collaboration-specific security. So it shows you the massive disconnect between what companies are assuming, as you mentioned earlier, is the way in which to protect users. But how that information is actually feeding into the end users themselves is very different, because it seems like it's just not actually getting to them, or that they don't even understand the concept itself. So awareness training has always been one of the key pillars to helping people understand the risks around them, to provide situational awareness, to let them know just how dangerous the world is in terms of cyber risk. But again, with that perfect storm that we face at the moment, you know, again, people working from home, load shedding threats, people having to work from different remote locations constantly, is definitely only adding to the kind of party that criminals have access to in terms of data, in terms of understanding how people are operating, in terms of how criminals can use the data against their social engineering attacks. And that's obviously what's permeated in our attack as the most important aspect, which is the level of sophistication we are seeing at the moment. It is unprecedented. I cannot explain to you the scale at which these guys are targeting just general people versus 2 to 3 years ago. There's no such thing as an unsophisticated attack anymore.
Yes, and Duane, apparently these kind of operations, clandestine operations, happen all over the world. Now, you're sitting with these young child geniuses, and you know, that are just constantly sitting to try and see the vulnerable victim that they're going to get. We hear about phishing and these spam and emails that you should not open, but on the surface it looks very authentic, and you know, almost inclined to want to respond to it, and that's where the weakness is. The risk management analyses for companies, especially SMEs that may not have the resources, what do you do to just safeguard yourself as best as possible?
So that is the all-seeing, all-eyeing question, right? It's like, what can SMEs, what can mid-market businesses do from a South African perspective? And I think it always comes down to two critical things that are very easily accessible. The first is technology that is accessible and freely available to make use of, and the second is communication. Having access to at least some form of security technology that is enabling you to protect your people outside of their own realm of understanding, and outside of their control is a critical form of protection. And the second thing is communication. You know, all you read about in all newspapers and online media is that end users, employees are your biggest risk, the human firewall, etc. And I think the companies that have seen the massive +1 effect are the companies taking the communication strategy to the next level, engaging end users, empowering end users, providing really detailed information on why cybersecurity is important, not just for the company's point of view, but for their personal point of view. You know, people are using work laptops at home, accessing information, shopping online, reading personal email, and they're utilizing work laptops for that. Keeping the user safe in terms of making sure that they understand the risk means that ultimately they protect the end device, the laptop. They absolutely have a clearer understanding of what the risk is and how to engage more effectively with the security risks that they face every single day.
Duane, we really appreciate your time, but it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the accolades behind you. You seem very well decorated. Maybe you can tell us what it is that you have been awarded for so many times.
As all my mates would say when they see me, it's participation medals for cycling. I wish they were for cybersecurity.
Congratulations, nonetheless. We always love a winner in South Africa, but we really appreciate your time, Duane. We're going to leave it there.